Picture a sweltering summer afternoon in Philadelphia around 1820. A laborer, exhausted and overheated, steps up to a public street pump, chugs a refreshing cup of cold water, staggers, and within minutes drops dead. If you look at mortality records from major American cities in the early 19th century, among the usual culprits of consumption and cholera, you will find dozens of fatalities officially attributed to a highly specific cause: drinking cold water. The leading medical minds of the time, including Dr. Benjamin Rush, believed the sheer physical shock of ice-cold liquid hitting an extremely warm body triggered a fatal spasm in the stomach that radiated to the heart. The threat was taken so seriously that humane societies pasted warning signs on public pumps, advising citizens to wash their hands and faces first, or to hold their cup to warm the liquid before daring to take a sip. The temperature of the water never actually killed anyone. The chill was simply masking a much more insidious threat. To figure out what was taking these lives, we have to break apart a 19th century cold beverage, ingredient by ingredient. The most critical ingredient is the water. By the mid-1800s, rapid urban population growth and new factories were transforming city rivers and natural wells into open sewers, heavily contaminated with human waste and chemical runoff. Physicians did not yet understand how infection spread. They operated under the miasma theory, a prevailing belief that illnesses were caught by inhaling foul-smelling bad air, leaving the actual contaminated drinking water completely unregulated. It took years of investigation before a physician named Dr. John Snow mapped a devastating cholera outbreak in London to a single infected well, proving that the disease was actually being transmitted directly through what people were drinking. This chart illustrates the cost of polluted water. The tall bars on the left show exceptionally high typhoid death rates in English towns before modern waste management. But after these cities constructed dedicated sewerage systems, mortality rates plummeted to the levels on the right. Long before anyone added ice, lemon, or sugar, the base liquid sitting in a cup was already loaded with pathogens. To cool that water down, vendors relied on massive blocks of natural ice. Before mechanical refrigeration, this ice was harvested directly from untreated, polluted rivers and lakes during the winter months. Consumers and vendors shared a fatal psychological blind spot. They assumed that the freezing process naturally purified the water, filtering out any hazards and leaving the ice safe to consume. In reality, freezing temperatures do not kill most bacteria. They simply put them in a state of hibernation. The ice acted as a perfectly preserved biological time capsule. Once that ice melted in a glass, the dormant pathogens woke up and multiplied. Worse, the extreme cold of the ice suppressed the foul odors and strange tastes that would normally warn someone that their food or drink was spoiling. People sought out these chilled drinks to escape the summer heat, completely unaware that the ice they were chewing on was delivering concentrated doses of cholera and dysentery straight into their digestive tracts. If you wanted a flavored beverage, you visited a public stall or soda fountain. These counters relied on unpasteurized milk and homemade sugar syrups, mixed and stored in glass syrup dispensers with absolutely no regulatory oversight. Left sitting on a counter in the sweltering heat, these sugary liquids spoiled quickly. Without the microbial control of modern pasteurization, those sweet flavorings rapidly became high-density breeding colonies for diseases like salmonella and E. coli. Finally, there was the problem of how you actually drank the beverage. Most public pumps, train stations, and coolers utilized the common cup, a single metal mug chained to the water source for everyone to share. Hundreds of people would drink from the exact same unwashed rim on any given day. This communal vessel bypassed the liquid entirely, serving as a highly efficient bridge to transfer respiratory diseases, like tuberculosis, directly from mouth to mouth. Even if a vendor miraculously sourced pristine spring water and pure ice, the unhygienic preparation and the shared tin mug ensured that drinking in public was a massive gamble with your life. Halting this invisible wave of disease required a multi-decade mobilization that touched almost every corner of society, forcing civil engineers, journalists, and lawmakers to overhaul how we interact with our environment. The first major step was a feat of physical infrastructure. cities began excavating massive underground sewer systems to permanently separate human waste from the municipal water supply, cutting off cholera and typhoid at the source. Next came a severe cultural shift. Muckraking journalists, most notably Upton Sinclair, documented the lack of hygiene in American food and beverage processing, publishing graphic exposés that shocked the public. That widespread public outrage forced the federal government to pass the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. For the first time, producers faced strict legal penalties for adulterating ingredients, creating a baseline for commercial hygiene. Then, in 1912, the government enacted the very first national drinking water regulation, strictly banning the use of the common cup on interstate trains, and breaking that incredibly lethal chain of transmission. Every chilled glass we pour today represents a hard-won victory over historical ignorance. It took a century of scientific revelation and massive engineering reform to transform a once lethal gamble into a simple, reliable refreshment.